Welcome to the Sacred Life. I'm your host, Aaron Beachy, coming to you from Higher Ground Fellowship in Kokomo, Indiana. We at the Sacred Life are dedicated to practical Christian ideas, and today we have for you another in our series on education. And bringing that to us today will be John Baylor, and also offering commentary will be his brother David. So, John, what do you have for us today?
I wanted to take a brief look at age-graded education, and the term age-graded just means that we separate kids according to how old they are. So all the 8-year-olds will be in one class together, and we'll call those the third graders, or whatever. We just break them up. If you were born within this 1 year span, then you're in this class, and if you're in the next 1 year span, then you're in the next class. Um, we kind of everybody is sort of aware that in early America, that's not how we did things. And it might seem like that's just a problem with resources, like, well, you had these little small schools all over the place and they just had one teacher in the whole school, and so they had to have well, 12 grades or 8 grades more likely, all 8 grades in the same building because there was only one teacher, so that's just what they had to do out of necessity. But that's the way everybody did it in Europe too. Um, that's that's the way that humans were educated throughout basically the course of human history. So this, in some ways, I'm not quite as passionate about this topic as I am some of the others. Although I think it's best to have kids around kids of other ages, and I'll talk about what are some of the benefits of that in a little bit. But I do think that getting rid of the age graded idea that we have today would lead to improvements, and the research kind of suggests that like there's nothing that's advantageous about age graded education. Not really. There are a couple things that might be more convenient, but as far as results, age graded education does not get better results than the alternative. I couldn't figure out anybody who would come up with any way to measure why it's superior. Um, but one thing that I want to interject here early on, is that part of this idea is that this, like so many of the other issues that we've addressed in the education series, is an idea that we got from the Prussian education system. Horace Mann was the United States education reformer who visited lots of schools in Europe and especially in Prussia. Prussia was the one that really impressed him, and he brought back a lot of Prussian ideas and worked very hard to get all the schools in America on the same page with implementing these Prussian education ideas. This age-graded education is one of those things that comes in from Horace Mann and from Prussian education. It's it's a very modernist way of doing things. It's a very like scientific, rational way of organizing a school system, and I think that that's most of our problems in education we can look at and say that's a very rational way of doing it. It's a very modern way of doing it, and it doesn't really work with human beings.
Yeah.
For somebody who's like a thinks of yourself as a genius who could come up with all the solutions to all the world's problems, and you can be the one in charge of coming up with all the solutions, then modern and rational sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're on the ground, then there are ways that it's just not as good as what it could be.
Well, this would be, we had recorded a discussion previously where we talked some about Prussian philosophy behind all these things, but unfortunately we lost that recording.
Okay.
So that's not the one that
Okay.
actually got wound up. So it
Yeah.
would be good to recap that a little bit. I'll just make it really brief that the Prussian system is built on the philosophy of enlightened absolutism, which is very reductive to the individual.
Mhm.
So like
Yeah.
basically like it elevates an elite class
Well,
of
if
people.
you just repeat that, enlightened absolutism is very reductive to the individual.
Right.
I mean, you can kind of just take those 6 words or whatever
Right.
and say like that is the problem in education. But
Yeah.
go ahead and explain what all that means.
Yeah, but like the way enlightened absolutism is like, because the key is absolutism, that it puts like an elite class of people on top that are like the enlightened rulers of society, and what makes them the ones who are worthy of ruling is that they're the superior men of the Enlightenment. They're smarter, they have a better understanding of the world, so they therefore have the right to rule. I think it was
and they create a system and they impose it on everybody else,
Right.
and everybody else must like you must change your essence and your nature in order to fit into the system that I have prescribed for you.
I think it was Immanuel Kant who was the philosopher, the Prussian philosopher, that was alive during the time of the great, like the most famous great Prussian leader, Frederick the Great. And he said, Kant said of Frederick the Great, that it is men's privilege to serve such a man as Frederick, because he's the perfect man of enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the attitude that they had, is that you lowly peasants, it's your privilege. It is an honor to you to be in servitude to the men of the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's
Right.
the philosophy
Yeah.
that we're talking about, that this modern education comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So the Prussian system is designed to create good servants.
Right.
Like it's like, that's not like a conspiracy, that is its actual directly stated design purpose, to create good soldiers and factory workers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to delve into the idea a little bit of what did you actually term? What's the term?
Age graded. Yeah.
Age-graded.
There's different terms you could use to refer to it, but that's a common.
If you observe our culture, I think there's something that kind of comes from that kind of, that bleeds out into our culture, and that is that different age groups tend to find it hard to associate, mingle
Mm-hmm.
with other age groups. For instance, younger people with older people. I know a lot of younger people find it hard to relate and even participate in activities with older people,
Mhm.
because, well, in school you were with your own age, and that's like the most impressionable part of your life, literally,
Right,
is
yeah.
when you're going through school. And so that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life. And I see the consequences spread further out into our culture with that.
Yeah. In any traditional culture, like a very important part of your ethical code is understanding how do you relate to people who are older than you and
Yeah.
to people who are younger than you.
Right.
And you get no practical experience of that almost at all in the United States. I mean, when you're going through education, you've got teachers, authority figures that are older than you, but you don't have like ordinary people that are older than you.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of my own like personal experience, I was homeschooled, so I did my schooling with like the youngest of my siblings. I was one of the older ones, but I helped them or whatever when it came to schooling or whatever. I have never found it hard to mingle with older people.
Mm-hmm.
It always, in fact, in some ways, I would say that it comes easy enough to me that some people are very skeptical of that in me and don't understand why I actually enjoy spending time with elders.
Right.
And it kind of has placed me in sometimes in kind of just an awkward feeling, like a feeling of almost not knowing where my place is supposed to be, because
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to find a group of friends your age, and that's supposed to be your group of friends for life.
Mm-hmm.
And that has not.
Yeah, but that's a very divided society.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and it's clear we see it all around us. It's
Yeah.
like it's everywhere. And
Right.
It's in the church.
it's definitely in the church. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you when you're looking for a church, you decide, am I going to go to a church that has a bunch of old people or a church that has a bunch of young people? Because
Yeah.
that's the way that they're divided up.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and
Okay,
go on and dig into it. a
Yeah,
little
so
bit.
that was sort of like personal anecdote version of some of the things that I'll cover here. If you divide kids up by their age group, then you're doing so because you think that's going to be a more efficient way of not grading this, of teaching people, and you think it's going to be more efficient because the assumption is if you're 8 years old, then you're of the same intelligence level and the same emotional level as all the other kids that are 8 years old, which is not a very good assumption. And so what you wind up doing is you're teaching 8-year-olds as a teacher, and you have an expectation, well, 8-year-olds are supposed to be at this level, and some of them are underneath that, and these kids, what are they doing? These kids have a problem because they're not at the level that they're supposed to be. And then at the same time, you have kids who are ahead of that level, and you're saying, how am I supposed to deal with this?
Mhm.
You're supposed to be down here. I'm not trying to present you with these things right here.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, I think you had a teacher that was upset that you knew how to read when you came into kindergarten because you were ahead of the level that you were supposed to be at, and so that's a frustration for a teacher. Well,
Right.
that shouldn't be a frustration.
Right.
And the more centralized the authority is, and I don't necessarily want to be a strong advocate for extreme decentralization of authority in the classroom, because you could be very extreme in that way. But if you're like so extreme where it's like all instruction has to come from me, and if you want help, you need to come to me as the teacher, then the smart kids are sort of a nuisance to you. And instead, if kids mentor each other and help each other along, then the smart kids are an advantage to you because that means less work for you because they can be helping the other kids out. But you have to have a different approach in order to utilize that as a strength.
Well, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit in our conversation. I mean, you kind of mentioned this, alluded to this a little bit already, but in like I guess our preparatory conversation we had last night about kind of like the arrogance of the intellect to, like, it looks like a really good idea in theory,
Mm-hmm.
that we divide children up according to their age. Like, logically, I think probably to everybody listening, like, that logically sounds like it makes sense. But it doesn't actually work in reality, for all the reasons you were discussing.
Mm-hmm.
But as I mentioned, the arrogance of the intellect, we tend, when we base something on rationalism, on reason and logic, not to admit when it doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to base something on reason and rationality, then you have to, in your mind, create a simplified model of reality
Mm-hmm.
and use that simplified model to feed into your arguments. You can't actually use reality and build a reasonable argument because reality is too complicated.
Well, so like, I mean, just, I think this is a good way to put it, that the way like the church fathers would have made this argument is to say that reason by itself is insane.
Mm-hmm.
It's detached from reality. And that's also sort of the definition of a demon,
Mm-hmm.
is like reason detached from meaning.
Yeah.
Like reason detached from, like, in this sense, literally from God, but you can extend that to mean meaning.
Well, you know, I mean, that's
in concert
that's
with
a
meaning.
that's a like a major goal of modern education is to like to have a system that's reasonable and rational and that is detached from God.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to get into that too much during this talk. We will get into that in some of our other conversations. But
Right, so
if you're separating kids, just did you have another comment?
I was just
before
going to say right, so we just whet your appetite a little bit.
Yeah. If you're going to separate kids according to how old they are, then there are a couple things that it makes very difficult, and they're all things that everybody values. Mastery education. Mastery education means before you move on to a task, you master the one that you're learning. You get to where you're very comfortable and confident in that, and it doesn't mean you have to get every single answer right all the time, but you have to have like a level of competence in that, and then you're ready to move on to the next level. Well, if everybody's supposed to be at the same place in the classroom, then you can't really do that because of the same thing I was describing. Some people are going to be stragglers and they're never getting it. So are we going to hold the whole class up until this kid gets to a mastery level? No, we're not going to do that. We're just going to push forward and leave that kid in the dust. And then meanwhile, you've got the kid that's too far ahead of time. Like, how am I supposed to give him the next thing that's a challenge for him? Because I'm trying to keep everybody at the same place because we're supposed to be on the same page, because that's the rational way of doing things, is to have everybody on the same page. So mastery learning is more difficult, or learning at your own pace is more difficult when you've got kids sorted just simply by their age. Peer collaboration, group work, and group work is weird because everybody in America thinks we need to be doing more collaboration in school, because when you get out in the real world, you're going to be working with other people, and you need to know how to operate as a team and do something productively together. And this is not just simply a an age graded thing, but just the fact of giving people grades at the end of a class makes group work difficult, because when we're working in a group together, my motivation, or a major part of my motivation, is that I want a good grade for me personally, and I don't care if you guys get good grades. And actually, it might hurt me if you guys get good grades, because if I'm focused on GPA in high school and I'm number 6 in the class and you're number 7, I want to make sure that I stay ahead of you. So like, we're giving kids rewards on an individual level, rewards or punishments on an individual level, and then saying, why can't we get them to work together as a group? So that's a big reason why group work is difficult. But as far as peer collaboration in this sense, this isn't necessarily just how do we have group projects where they're working together, but more from the perspective of students who are more advanced being able to mentor students who are younger, or less advanced, I should say, because it's not all about age. Sometimes it can be the younger student who's exceptionally bright and is helping out the other kids. Mm-hmm. And I can't come up with a way in an age graded school. I can't come up with a very good way to say, hey, this kid's in 6th grade, but these kids in 5th grade need help with something that he already knows, so let's send him down to the 5th grade so he can help those people. Mm-hmm. It's very awkward to try to develop a system like that works within the age graded system. But if we're together with different ages, it's very easy, it's very natural. So that sort of working together, that sort of mentoring is made more difficult because we've created a division between that 6th grader and this 5th grader. You have a weak or a harder time developing a sense of community within the school, a harder time with students developing empathy for one another, because if we're on the age graded system and you're struggling, then I look at you and your struggles and I think, well, this kid is stupid because he's supposed to be at this level and he's not here. And if I'm with all kinds of people of different ages, some of them are doing really well, some of them are struggling, and I don't even think of it as being a factor of age or intelligence. I just think like, oh, hey, this guy's not getting it. There's no place where we're supposed to be. So when I see this guy's not getting it, then I can see, oh, I can help this guy to get it. Mm-hmm. And so there's less of a stigma around that. And also, one last thing that's related to this working together with peers is developing leadership. Because it's hard for me to send that 6th grader down to the 5th grade classroom, he's not going to have a lot of natural opportunities to be a leader to other people. And if we're together with kids of a wide range of ability levels, which means a wide range of ages, then the older kids are going to take roles of leadership, and the younger kids are going to have them as role models that they can look up to. And when there's a good leader that's 4 years older than them, then they can say, man, when I'm that age, that's what I want to do in this class. Mm-hmm. I want to offer what that kid has to offer me right now. So the older kid has an opportunity to become a leader, and the younger kid has an opportunity to look up to a leader, and a leader that's somebody that he can be. Because it's hard for me to look at a teacher and say, I can be that, because that's a very, very long-term goal. But to say like, man, 2 years from now or 4 years from now, that's what I want to be. That's a lot easier for me to manage mentally, for me to picture myself 4 years down the road or 2 years down the road or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I kind of already mentioned this as well. We, in education, generally, this is what everybody wants. We want failure to be acceptable. We want people to be able to try something and mess up and say, oh, I messed up, but I know if I keep at it, then I'll be able to get this and I'll be able to make progress. Failure is a part of learning. And if you're in a system where you've got a bunch of people, again, it's about a wide range of abilities. And some of them are older, some of them are younger, whatever. But now if I'm the 6th grader and I'm only operating at a 4th grade reading level or whatever, I'm not the dumbest kid in the room anymore. And if I'm the 1st grader and I'm the dumbest kid in the room, who cares? Because I'm supposed to be. I'm a 1st grader. So there's again, like less of a stigma of failure or less of a stigma of being slow. So especially kids who are going to struggle in school, then it is just a major advantage for them to be with kids of all different age ranges and ability levels. A couple specific benefits of having all the ages together. Parents are more involved in their kids' education, which is interesting, and I'm not exactly sure what the rationale is or the reason for that. I mean, I shouldn't say rationale because it's just that's what it is. Like, we don't have to know why it's that way, but parents are more involved when the kids are all together. And it may have something to do with if the kids are all together, then it's more likely that they'll have the same teacher year after year. And so parents can develop a long-term relationship with that teacher. So like you might have 1 year as a parent where you work real hard to get to know all the kids' teachers, and then the next year, like, I just don't have that much energy anymore. And if it's the same teacher, then there's not a difficulty. You don't have to build a new relationship. So there's no burden about getting to know the teacher or anything like that. So improved parent involvement. When it comes to academic achievement, there's not really evidence that age-graded learning is better academically. The way that we do it right now, there's not any evidence that that's achieving better results. Some studies show there's no difference. Some studies show that it's better when you have multiple ages together, especially in reading and language arts. But like I said, I didn't really find anybody that was saying, no, the system that we use right now actually works better than this alternative. Social and emotional development. Social emotional learning is kind of like a big buzzword in education right now. We're saying, it's not all about the academic content. We want kids to care about each other and treat each other well. And I'll say the traditional way of doing things where you have different ages together, that's better than what we have right now in terms of social and emotional development. So kids, if multiple ages are all together, then they have more pro-social behavior, higher self-esteem, improved social skills, improved empathy, improved cooperative skills. Again, they have positive role models, they have opportunities for mentoring, they have more cooperative learning experience, and because they've had all those experiences, then just like anything you could think to measure when it comes to emotional and social development is better for those kids that are all together. Teachers adjust their practices. You obviously you can't teach a wide range of ages in the same way that you would teach everybody who's the same age, and everybody who's moving at the same pace. Like now, all your students are moving at different paces, and they're years apart from each other academically. So you have major adjustments to make as a teacher, and teachers' methods are going to be more individualized, more student-centered, more differentiated strategies, which means I teach you in a different way than I teach you because I understand you're at a different level than this person is. Mm-hmm. And again, like all those things are, I mean, if you're in education, those are all things that you've heard about many, many times, and your administrators and people in your education schools, whatever, are all trying to stress, well, do whatever you can to have differentiated instruction. Do whatever you can to have student-centered instructions where you get out of the spotlight and let the students lead things. And all that happens naturally when you've got multiple ages all together.
I guess like where my thoughts going with a lot of these things that are, like you basically already said this, but just the artificial environment, the artificial worldview and perspective that you unwittingly train people in when you impose these, I guess, artificial divisions on them in this way. So like things like you give people unreal expectations that everybody should be on the same level, and so there's a problem if you're on either side. Mm-hmm. So it's like if you're inferior, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
But there's also something wrong with you if you're superior.
Right.
And so it just creates this artificial world. And since it's artificial world, it's like you're not equipped to actually understand people, understand real life situations, which strikes me as a complaint like a lot of people have coming out of school. It's just like, well, they didn't prepare me for anything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Then I'll just add to this like a couple of challenges with having all the ages together. It's a little difficult to manage the classroom. I haven't worked very much with younger kids, and I don't particularly want to. And the biggest part of it is that like the older the kid is, the more likely that they're going to know how to sit and listen when it's time to listen and get the work done when it's time to get the work done, and not be distracted by quite as many crazy things, have a longer attention span and all that. So I don't know. I mean, an elementary teacher might object if I would say that classroom management is easier with older and more mature kids because they have like tricks that they can use on younger kids that they wouldn't be able to use on older kids or something. But like the elementary teacher has certain classroom management skills. The high school has different classroom management skills, and now you're going to have all of those if you've got a wide age range of kids. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have K through 12 all in the same classroom. By the way, you could have K through 6 in one classroom and 7 through 12 in one classroom.
Yeah, well, I mean,
or there's other ways that you divide things up by subject matter, and whoever's ready to take that subject is taking it or whatever.
if you go back to like the one room schoolhouse frontier times, they would have had 8 grades of education. Right. They still use one room schools predominantly, would be the predominant thing that you would encounter in Europe, but that would be for primary education.
Right.
So it's like there still is like 6 or 7 years of students at most in the class.
Yeah, when you get to like higher academic subjects, then it sort of loses. You don't have quite the same ability to teach like. Okay, my kindergartners are sitting in this classroom while, or not even my kindergartners, but I'll go with an older grade. My 6th graders are sitting here while I'm trying to teach algebra 2, or calculus to the older kids. Like that doesn't make sense anymore. So like once you get to a certain level, then a younger student just isn't going to be able to comprehend it at all. And so there will tend to be like more differentiation as you get older.
Yeah, and another thought I had is like you mentioned, one of the cons is that it's harder to manage, and my immediate thought was, is that actually a con?
Well,
because like
it plays into what I was saying about teachers adjust their strategies, and everything that they do to change is all things that educators want to be doing anyways.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge, and anything that's a challenge, and anytime you have to change, like okay, that is a problem, that is a stressor. But yeah, it does lead to good results generally.
Right, but like I was also thinking like that's something that would be seen as a problem. The fact that the teacher is unable to manage things would be seen as a serious problem to an enlightened absolutist.
Yeah, right.
But wouldn't have been seen as a problem to like a medieval person. They would have seen that as like, that's not a problem, that's one of the best features.
Yeah.
Because like it presents a challenge to the students.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think as a teacher, there's sort of like the right amount of chaos that you want to exist in your classroom. And it's not necessarily easy to hit that balance all the time. And some teachers will tend to be so structured that it's kind of stifling. Yeah. And other teachers will tend to be so chaotic that the kids are just out of control and you never get anything done. And you probably as a teacher like err on one side of that or the other. But you want some clear structure, and you also want some chaos because you want freedom and inventiveness and risk taking, like intellectual risk taking and intellectual adventurousness. You want that in your students, and so like there needs to be something that's out of your control in the classroom.
Yeah, almost as if it's like real, the way life really is.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying.
You want your kids to be able to deal with that too. Like since that's the way life really is, since things are wild and unpredictable in the real world, kids need to be educated in an environment where they learn how to deal with that.
Right. That's kind of
and
what
how to thrive in that situation.
that's kind of what I was getting at, was saying a medieval person wouldn't have viewed that as a problem. They would have viewed that as a good thing.
Yeah,
because
right.
it's like that's how the real world actually is.
Yeah.
So it's like you're educating the students in an aspect of life.
Mm-hmm. That's basically going to cover it for my notes, and again the idea that I introduced fairly early on is that what we have is a very rational approach, and we've divided things up and classified things and controlled and maintained things in this certain way. And part of the reason that it's difficult for our education to solve its problems is because if we say we want our teachers to do more differentiated instruction and more student-centered instruction and things like that, then it's very difficult to make changes to the current system when the current system is modernist and rationalist. Because all these things that people sometimes say they want to change, the thing that they're pushing for, it can't really survive in the system that we have right now.
Yeah. I don't know that I really have a whole lot of other comments.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you did a good job. I mean, I made the comments I thought were relevant.
I'm proud of you.
Well, everything else would be artificial.
All right. Well, that was a good discussion, and thank you, John, for offering those ideas and thoughts and observations. It's good to think about, and it further leads us to think about what are we actually doing? What's our approach? Because we see a lot of evidence around us that the approach we've taken for a good long while is probably not doing the best.
Yeah, and it's these people in the middle of the 1800s that just loved their science and their rationality.
Yeah,
and
it's like everything was ruined in the 1800s. It's just keep that in mind.
All right. Well, we want to thank you all for joining us today on The Sacred Life, and please leave your comments or questions down below. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section, and if there is an answer, or if we have an idea of an answer, one of us can try to get back with you on that stuff. But we appreciate your feedback. We wish you peace in Christ.